ma'am.
Hello.
These are discussing today, yes.
Great, Priyanka.
Welcome to IMPRI Web Policy Talk. I request Anshula to take over the stage now. Thank you.
Good evening to one and all. I am Anshula Mehta, Assistant Director at Impact and Policy Research Institute, IMPRI, New Delhi. And I welcome you all to episode 22 of our talk series, The State of Gender Equality, #GenderGaps, organized by the Gender Impact Studies Center at IMPRI, along with GenDev Center for Research and Innovation and Delhi Post. Today, we have with us Dr. Ritu Agarwal, speaking on the COVID-19 pandemic and women's lives in Wuhan. And it's my pleasure to introduce her to you all. Dr. Ritu Agarwal is an associate professor at the Center for East Asian Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, JNU, Delhi. She holds a PhD in Chinese Studies from the University of Delhi and an MA in Political Science from JNU. Her doctoral work explored the micro-level agrarian transformation in Yunnan province, and she is currently engaged in questions of provincial transformation, especially in Yunnan. Her research interests are rural political economy, urbanization, gender studies, and provincial politics. Dr. Ritu Agarwal studied Mandarin Chinese from Beijing Language and Culture University, Beijing. She was a visiting scholar to Yunnan Academy of Social Sciences, Kunming, and visiting fellow to Yunnan Minzu University and Yunnan University recently. She was also affiliated to the Chinese University of Hong Kong and East Asia Institute at the National University of Singapore to collect material for her research work. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us to share your insights on this topic. We also have with us Professor Govind Kelkar, who is the chair for today's session. She is a chairperson of IMPRI's Gender Impact Studies Center and also executive director of the GenDev Center for Research and Innovation. With that, I hand it over to you, ma'am, to make your initial remarks and then invite Dr. Ritu Agarwal to make her presentation.
Okay. My initial remarks are to welcome Professor Ritu Agarwal. We welcome you in this forum. Ritu, I can call you Ritu, I hope. So having known you for a number of years, we have known each other. So really, we have been looking forward to your sharing of your knowledge, wisdom, analysis of recent developments in China in the context of COVID-19. And when you used the word Wuhan, I was very excited in person because Wuhan is known for two things. It is known really for the COVID, source of COVID. I don't know to what, but it is the common kind of parlance. And to the extent of that, wherever the people from Wuhan were there, they were considered carrying the virus. I was in Chiang Mai at that time, and they said, oh, there are a lot of business people from Wuhan, so you must be infected. Nothing happened still by now, but this is the kind of Wuhan's reputation goes. Second, it is also known for a Wuhan diary by Fang Fang, which became internationally known kind of thing. And that is another important thing. I also thought that background, it would be important that to discuss a kind of feminist activism, which so much kind of frowned upon in China. At the same time, there are kind of a lot of feminist activities are there. Cell phone games has been widely criticized for its derogatory depiction of women and migrant workers situation and violence against women in China despite the law and it's in 2016. So these are the things that which makes really a little bit of common kind of situation between India and China. So we look forward to your presentation. Professor Ritu Agarwal, please go ahead. Over to you.
Okay, so I'm so happy to be here. And so I know Arjun has been saying that it's very cold, but it's nice to be having engaged on issues on China which interest everyone. And I'm really thankful to Dr. Govind Kelkar, whom I knew for so many years now. And she really very nicely put the background on Wuhan, that how Wuhan historically has been so important, not only in terms of feminist activism. And also in today's time, it has created a whole lot of, a kind of a news around about the pandemic situation, etc. So maybe, I also want to begin with historical connections of Wuhan with the female activism, with the women activism to begin with, before I take you to journey to how Wuhan, especially women in Wuhan, fought with COVID-19 pandemic situation. So maybe we go to a first slide, because this is I prepared some slide. Well, I don't have a map now, but as you can see, it considered to be a kind of a tri-city complex, which considered to be very important, popular, Hankou, Wuchang, and Hanyang. And it's located in the eastern Jianghan Plain in central China. And interestingly, this place was very important, especially in the revolutionary time. Those who are familiar with the anti-Japanese war revolutionary history of China, I'm sure they must have been knowing about it, that it has created a kind of a new spaces for women's social and political activism. So what happened is that, because of the liberal space it has created for social elite in China, women were able to leave from Shanghai and Nanjing, where there was a kind of a, they were forced to leave that area, and they were able to make a kind of a united front. So Funi Jie Da Lian He Chanxian, which was actually created a kind of a new sense of resistance against Japanese war in Wuhan. So Wuhan became a very important site of women activism during the anti-Japanese war. So there is a kind of already a resistance culture, which I wanted to, make you to think, because Professor Kelkar mentioned about this, diary from Wuhan, which became so popular. So there's something, the kind of resistance culture which was already very, very much existing in Wuhan, especially during the anti-Japanese war. And this kind of a resistance culture actually got articulated through, I'm sure the people who have gone to China, they all know about the singing, drama performances, which has been a feature of popular culture. And through this, it has been used to articulate the kind of feelings, emotions, interests people have about a particular kind of phenomena. So this has been clearly used in China even in those years. Apart from that, you have various journals and newspaper, which was also constantly writing about this resistance culture. Next slide. So basically, even in those years, I just wanted to just highlight those things to begin with, that you have in those years even this Hubei Provincial Women's Wartime Service Group, which was very much located in Wuhan. So this kind of situations was very much existent in Wuhan, in Wuhan city as such. Now let me now connect you to the contemporary time, when, next slide, when we have this spread of pandemic. So all this spread of pandemic became so much widespread. And in this kind of conditions, first thing which came to our mind is a Wuhan Central Hospital, from where it's supposed to begin. All of this began from there. So, people have called it mysterious disease or the contagion, the way it has been spreading all over Wuhan. People have seen, the nurses and doctors who are working there, that, the kind of number of patients which were brought to the hospital in a number was increasing daily, as well as you will see the hospital capacity of ICU beds, which are also going up. So which means that there was a kind of a life-threatening situation which started emerging in Wuhan Central Hospital. And we all know that it all began from a WeChat screenshot from the Li Wenliang, who basically first time indicated there's something like SARS kind of virus, which seems to be emerging from a South China seafood wholesale market, which seems to be not very far from, just 2 kilometers from this Wuhan Central Hospital. And in this pandemic kind of a situation, there were a kind of a narrative initially by this Ye Qi nurse, who's supposed to be working in this hospital for quite some time. And then she says that suddenly she got an order that she got transferred to this respiratory intensive unit. So why I'm telling you all this thing, the kind of insecurity, the kind of life-threatening, a sensation which was a feeling which emerged in that hospital, thinking that what is it, what kind of disease it is, and nobody seems to be knowing that how deadly is going to be in the beginning. And this nurse keep on, describing that how all the patients, so all these ICU beds, etc., were made to fill up, and they were only the patients who were suffering from a kind of a shortness of breath. That became a kind of phenomena. And this kind of a disease seems to be transferring from one person to another. So this something which she has not seen in this last 4 years of her career. So, and when she even tried to tell to his parents that this is what it is going to be, I mean, you should be careful, the people should wear mask and all, but nobody is going to believe her stories. And then she found herself in a situation where she was, compelled to wear all kind of protective gears as well as protective suits and diapers so that she can avoid going to the bathroom. So suddenly it became a kind of very emergency kind of situation. And also, I'm sure that all of you must be hearing about it, that when you wear all these protective goggles or as well as the protective suits, you have all kind of the impressions, the kind of marks on your face, which actually tell you the story, the kind of difficult situation people have gone through who have actually served as nurses in this kind of pandemic. So the stories actually goes on that how people had to immediately react to this kind of situation, not knowing that what kind of emergent situation people can be in. And as well as they were made to accustomed to all kind of difficult circumstances they found themselves in. So next slide. And then suddenly people found that, so many employees had virus, including the vice president, director of nursing, and orthopedics department seems to be wiped out. And so many doctors and nurses have lost their lives. So something which people were not prepared for. And in fact, in this kind of situations, when everything was going like hush-hush affair, that, you are not supposed to be telling what kind of disease is this, whether it has come from the seafood market or whether it has been spreading like a SARS virus. So in this kind of situation, when a director of this emergency at Wuhan Central Hospital, a woman named Ai Fan, she decided to speak out, criticizing hospital authorities, risking her job as well as the fear of detention. That something like, a mysterious disease has occurred, has been spreading around in Wuhan, and it has killed a lot of her colleagues as well as friends in the hospital. So this became a kind of a war-like situation in China, and the city government was struggling to make the medical facilities and hospital beds available for the patients, as well as everybody knows that, the closing down of schools, colleges, restaurants, public facilities, business enterprises. So all these are, definitely are going to have an impact on the people, especially women seems to be having a, adverse impact on the women's condition. So I come to know what impact is going to have and how women participated in this kind of a emergency situation. Now, when I was looking at this, the material I was reading, and I was trying to find out that how to understand the women's situation in this pandemic. And the first kind of a news which I was reading was basically narrative, which was talking about that women as a frontline workers. And so since majority of medical staff in Chinese hospitals are women, and especially during this COVID-19, basically women who become at the forefront to fight this battle to contain this pandemic. And the female nurses, not only from Wuhan, but also from other cities, leaving their family behind, turn up in a big number. So basically, it's like, mobilization, not only from Wuhan, but also from the nearby cities, as well as from the other provinces as well, to come and give and do some kind of a help to save the people from this pandemic. Of course, initially they were not provided enough masks, PPE kits, and other protective gears. But then because they decided to attend this, the number of patients as they were increasing day by day. And then I came across stories and the interviews by some of the nurses, for example, like Coach Hin. And she says that how, all this, her colleagues and they were the one, in fact, they were exposed to the virus through her work, because her work basically was to collect the blood samples, etc. But even after they were quarantined and they recovered, they had to come back and join the work. So which means that they were again exposed to all kind of a, the dangers which they may fall into because of this pandemic. And also they were nursing assistants, like, some of these migrant rural women who also came from the other areas. They also found themselves more at risk than the doctors and the full-time nurses. And in fact, there was a next slide. There was this Yeah. So these are some of the pictures I collected, the frontline workers. On the one hand, you have these nurses working in a hospital full time, wearing all these protective gears, covering. I mean, the suit they were wearing was almost. I mean, there are narratives which you say that you cannot even unzip them, because if you unzip them, this question of you getting this contagion, getting this disease. So you have to be extra careful about all these things. So nursing assistants, they found it so difficult, and they says that that once they were confirmed with COVID-19, they was forced to leave the ward, of course. But once they, they were almost on the road after they were infected with the COVID-19, facing for their quarantine. I mean, facing to be quarantined, in the sense that initially China did not have so much of quarantine facilities. So which means that they were thinking that where they can be quarantined, and after some days spending on the street, they finally get some space in the quarantine areas, but they have to return to the hospital again to look after the COVID-19 patients. So basically means that you have all this danger of getting the infections again, even after you recovered from the infection one more time, because you still are working with in a condition, the hospitals, which is full of COVID-19 patients. So basically, but women, in this situation, have shown all this, their will, their professionalism, their selfless devotions, resilience, along with all their, male people who were working in this area. So maybe next slide, we can still show the pictures that how, they were so determined to take the battle in their hand and fight against this COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah. So as of, about 3,500, female medical workers from all around the countries. So which means that has been dispatched to the central Chinese Wuhan hospital combating this pandemic. So there was, there was a report from Wuhan where the nurse told before leaving to the media that, I mean, regarding her shorter length haircut story, that, they decided to cut their hair short because they realized that once you have to wear these protective suits, it may not be convenient for them to go ahead with the long hair. So in this, they said the looking good is no longer important at this moment, because what is more important is that safety of these patients. And they were supposed to take a long hour shift, getting dressed, undressed from this, suits, which almost took them 2 hours. They usually used to wear 5 layers of clothes under the gown, but they still feel, kind of a very cold in this unheated ward. So which means that, apart from the work, the condition in which they were supposed to work was also quite challenging in that time. And apparently the first batch of the medical staff, which came from Jiangxi, where mostly were women were there, as well as the medical workers from other places also, the most of them who were deployed to come to assist people in this central hospitals serving the COVID-19 patients were also women. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so this I've almost covered. Now the next story of, apart from these frontline workers, the next kind of the category of women which were quite involved in doing all kind of work were the community workers. Now, community work become very important in China, especially in this pandemic era, because they were supposed to be involved in daily checkup of the patients, taking care of especially old age parents who were staying alone in the households, delivering supplies to the households. I mean, because everything was shut down all of a sudden. So basically somebody has to ensure that vegetable and the essential commodities delivered at the families, at the household where some of the people who were living were old age. So basically, I remember even I used to have a dialogue with my friends in China in those years, and they were saying that they want to manage something easy at home so that they can, lessen the burden on the country, providing free meal to the people. So there was all this, the idea of that, how to ensure the supply of vegetables and commodities to this neighborhood areas where mostly you have the old age population living. So I gave the example of, Shuchia is a lady. Saikonchia, what is the meaning of Saikonchia? Saikonchia basically is the one who became a kind of a, vegetable supplier in that area. So there was a woman as a volunteer workers in this particular community street where they decided to provide vegetables and essential commodities to those residents, especially who are not able to order or who are not able to bring any kind of a supply to their areas. Second, I gave example of Huang Ping as a teacher. So she's supposed to, was placed somewhere else, but she decided to come back. Especially in that time where city was actually completely closed down, but it looks like that she actually walked and cycled back to her hometown in Wuhan, and she decided to work for those people where the people are working in this hospital, but the children and the old age parents are left behind. And she decided to have a kind of a tie-up with the supermarket to provide a kind of a commodities in a much cheaper rate, because the whole problem was that how to make the commodities price also under control, because the commodity price was going up in this pandemic situation. Third kind of a volunteer work I can think of is that Ting Sao Lee. Now, Ting Sao Lee was another community secretary, and she basically decided to work a lot for this pandemic kind of situation by looking at these factors of quarantine, protection, livelihood, livelihood protection, investigation, isolation. So all these factors they have to keep in mind. And also with this, they have to keep their safety also in mind, that when they're doing all these things, how much your safety has been protected. Yeah, you can show, yeah. So this is Sai Kwan Chia. This is a vegetable supply to this neighborhood areas where you are, keeping a kind of a packet full of vegetables, thinking that who are in the priority list to whom this kind of supplies can be taken place. So you can see mostly all this, people who are wearing, this is, yeah, you can go to next slide. This is a kind of situation where I'm saying that they are talking about the daily temperatures, whether somebody has COVID or not, isolation, quarantine. So it's a kind of, having a round all throughout the day, finding out that whether the daily checkup of temperature has been taking place or not systematically. So all this community work has been done by women largely in the grassroots level. Yeah. Next slide, we can go. Next, I found very interesting about the sanitation workers, which actually had a kind of a heavy toll on their work. And because the main tasks were basically, they were involved in, of course, keeping the street clean, but they have apart from the usual cleaning of services, they have to also empty the mask recycling bins, sterilize their vehicles, spray disinfectant into the street. So this cleaning and making the street disinfectant also became a kind of an important task for this sanitation workers. And Miss Lien, who quoted in one of the interviews in some of this, the item which I was checking, where she says, though she has paid 70 yuan per day, but if she is not able to perform her duty, her double salary will be cut. So in this kind of extreme, harsh, as well as demanding conditions, they decided, even when the transportation was not working well, they decided to walk for an hour and so to get to the cleaning station. And especially in the initial time when the COVID-19 was really spreading in a big way, the heavy work like, garbage collections and public toilets cleaning, picking of trash, vehicles, disposable bags, I mean, whatever it was becoming increasing, the work was increasing much in number. And as well as the community service centers, the hospital were sterilized. So apart from cleaning, you have sterilization work as well. And then the disposing of the discarded masks, which became a kind of a too much of a toll on the sanitation workers' life. So which means that, even after they have to walk for an hour or so to get down to their work, that become a kind of primary responsibility. And when they reach to their work, their temperatures were checked, their the uniform was disinfected, and they were supposed to change mask after 4 hours. So this is a kind of all situation they were going through while performing this kind of work. Next slide. Yeah. So you see that, in this trash, one of the important bin has a kind of a red cover saying that this is specifically for those khauchang, that mask which people are wearing. And that was made to kept there so that it can be, cleaned, or it can be completely cleared after 4 hours when it is full. And then disinfectant of this spray, which is going on the street. Both the photos actually show that. Yeah. Okay. Now, fourth or fifth, whatever, the women also performed a significant role as a caterers and the taxi drivers. And, for example, Changching, and also the dedicated caterers, delivery drivers, they were working around the clock to provide free meals to medical staff in Wuhan, because the medical staff in Wuhan are not able to go back to their hometowns. They are not able to go anywhere to eat their meals. So they have taken the responsibility of providing free meal to this medical staff. And for that, they have made a huge sacrifice, because most of this migrant labor who is engaged in this kind of a caterers and taxi driver work, so mostly some of them have come from Shanxi and they could not go back to their village. I mean, they could not go back to their hometown even after it was a spring festival. And they were made to stay back, but they decided to provide meal to all this, all the people who are working in this hospital. So you have this delivery workers, taxi drivers, sanitations, community workers, who were not only supplying food, but other daily necessities as well as medicines for those who were not going out. So I got, so next, and we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is a special. There was a special company, Meituan, which will come in one of the pictures, where they were decided to provide meal to all those people who are working there. Next photo. Yeah, so this is all this food has been packed up in the taxis and then sent it to the hospital where they were supposed to. Yeah, and you will see this here. The nurses are queuing up to pick up their packets of food. Yeah. So so basically, the food delivery company, though it has employed most of this migrant women workers, but they decided to stay back. And also they took a special task of carrying all these women or people who needed some kind of a hospital help. So they did not think of too much about the disease or the infection they may get into. Rather, they actually decide to get into this kind of voluntary work, providing all kind of help to the people. Now, I come to this after describing the stories of women who actually decide to be very much coming forward and participating in this pandemic situation so that they can provide all kind of voluntary work. Now, after the COVID-19, what are the industries which are mainly affected by this pandemic? And though there was a statistics and figure which actually indicate that most of the women are actually working in this area of agriculture, hotel catering, wholesale retail industries, domestic workers and culture entertainment. And these areas are supposed to be very badly hit after the COVID-19, which may have some kind of an impact on situation, as well as this industry may take some time to employ women back, as well as give them the salaries. Yeah. And yeah, we can, so I got this, slide to basically indicate. So the percentage in the red, you can see is the women employment, and the blue color is basically about the men's employment in the particular sector. So if you go from, below Weisheng, the character which is written in the last part of this figure data, actually shows about the nurses, the sanitation kind of work, where you see the mostly women are employed in this area. So, and then you have this Susha, so basically about the catering, as well as your finance and education, retail. So all this service industry where you have most of the women employed. So therefore, these sectors are going to have a kind of a adverse impact on women's employment, where after the COVID-19, and these are sectors where you have the most number of women employed in this area. Rather, if you go in the up, so basically construction as well as transportation and communication, you have, and science and technology, where you have, and the real estate, where you have mostly men employed, which is not going to be, where maybe the COVID-19 impact may not be as high as in the service sector or some of these, basically where women are employed in more in number. And also, yeah. So I'm saying that since women mainly work in the area of technical staff and the professional staff, and managers and the party government offices, you have mostly male. So given this kind of a paradox in the employment situation in China, where you have mostly women working as nurses or domestic workers or street cleaners, naturally the COVID-19 has a kind of adverse impact on these situations. Also, the unemployment of the women in the early years of 2024, basically when they come out of the college years or undergraduation, there also looks like that women are going to get less, employment a little later than the men, because as it is, there's a kind of a disparity in women getting employment in urban areas, which is little lesser than the men getting employment in those areas. So there is always a kind of a, as it is, there's a kind of a disparity in these sectors, which is further going to be affected, which is further going to have a kind of an impact, adverse impact because of COVID-19. Yeah. Yeah, next slide we can go. Yeah. See, this is which I come across by Ministry of Human Resources and Social Security. And we say that there are almost 100 most unemployment jobs in China by third quarter 2020 as a kind of a impact of COVID-19. And among them, all this sales staff, cleaners, restaurant waiters, security guards, housekeeping attendants, customer service, real estate brokers, delivery workers. So all these considered to be a top 10 most underemployed occupation. And needless to say, most of these sectors are actually dominated by women. So therefore, the impact of COVID-19 on women's employment situation is going to be much adverse in China than one can think of, because of the paradox in the situation of women employment in these sectors. Now, before I come to this slide, I also want to say that as it is in China, if you look at it, there was a kind of a discrimination. I mean, there's reports of gender discrimination, especially in some of the sectors where people prefer more men than women. So there was a kind of a report where there was advertisement that they prefer men over women because they think that in these particular sectors, since overtime is required or intensive work is needed, men can actually be more preferred than women. So you have this kind of situation in China already, where in particular sectors, men are preferred more in number than women. Apart from that, some of the important technological companies like Tencent, Baidu, and Alibaba, they are also in a way, creating a kind of particular images of women working in their companies. So all this are happening in China, though you have a kind of a legal protection about women's work, women's employment in Chinese constitution, as well as the various laws which China has created from early 1980s till now. So you have, for example, law on the protection of women's rights and interest. You have, talking about women's development guidelines in 1995 onwards. Then you have, series of all this development program which China has been engaged in, especially since Beijing Conference of Women in 1995. But even after that, you still have a kind of a discrimination in terms of employment, participation of women in the labor force, considering that women are actually coming up in a big number in some other sectors. So what is happening in those areas also? Some of the sectors seems to be considered as belonging to women, where women are considered to be preferred more. For example, there is a kind of a term which has been used in China, cleaning auntie. So the cleaning job actually goes to women more. And also there is a kind of this cooking auntie. So this kind of a cleaning and cooking kind of a job, which has been advertised as a kind of a women type of job, which has been coming up in a big way in China. So which means that since this already been persisting kind of inequalities, which were very much there in China earlier, so COVID-19 actually has further aggravated it by having an impact because these are the sectors which are quite hardly hit because of this pandemic. Now, this last photo which I'm showing in this slide is basically about the Auntie Xiong, which seems to be a kind of a very favorite like small scale businesses, or you have the street businesses or the street vendors, where people in the morning want to pick up the breakfast before going to their offices as well as going to their jobs. And in this situation, the one Auntie Xiong which they always miss, who lost her life due to COVID-19 pandemic, and which used to make this Wuhan breakfast quite delicious, and people from all over she used to have clients from all over the places, and people who had left that area also come from their far off places to eat her breakfast. So the sad story which was going in the media saying that, oh, the COVID-19 has opened up the street and the street businesses, but Auntie Xiong will be missed by the residents, because she somehow, because of no security or because of no welfare packages, she could not make up to this fight against the COVID-19. And so the question is that what about all this small scale business, street vendors, and this the women who are actually running the small business on the street? This seems to be completely kind of a miss story which people have not covered much, apart from this frontline workers in normally official narratives of China. Okay, so and before so I can further can talk about some little bit more about how this kind of pandemic also created a kind of a problem for generally about the women's work, in the sense that how do you look at now women's work in China, where most of this employment as well as the kind of existing inequalities highlighted the sectors which were earlier employed by women, as well as created a kind of a discrimination further against the women's condition. Now, domestic violence, of course, people, I mean, there were stories of that, how, as well as newspaper reports about that, how everybody is actually going through a time where people are end up in doing a lot of work. So women especially are doing household work, as well as managing the offices, as well as the children. So this extra work which has been imposed on women because of COVID-19. Apart from that, there were also narratives of domestic violence, which has also increased in a big ways in China. And somewhere this domestic violence are considered to be supposed to be aggravated more, because mostly women are at home, and somehow that seems to be a little more difficult to accept women as a kind of a working conditions in China. So this is again a phenomena which has been highlighted, especially by the media, that how it is important that the domestic violence as a kind of especially by Women's Federation, when they have made a kind of a law against this domestic violence in 2015. But still after that, so many years, you still see kind of phenomena happening, especially this COVID-19, which has highlighted this particular year, when women have been thrown out from their homes and they have been asked to be on the street, considering the situation they are in. So this is something which I think Chinese government could not control, even after there was a kind of emergency situation in this area. So to basically, conclude in the sense that how one can look at now the women's situation after this COVID-19 pandemic. See, China actually began from this very much phrases of gender equality, where people were talking about that men and women are equal. And so what men can do, what women can do too. And then after, especially after the reforms, you have a kind of, the opening of the research institutes, as well as the Gender Studies Center in various universities. You have Women's Federation offices, which actually has been now, having a kind of research more on not only simply on men and women equality, but also they have been focusing on social gender, social transformation. So that became a kind of a much wider, the theoretical framework in which most of this academia, as well as the women's organization, seems to be working in. But even after doing so much, there's still a kind of though women have participated almost in a much larger number when there was a pandemic, and you will see that women have come up in a big way in terms of voluntary work, whether in case of nurses or doctors or medical staff, or in case of help in the community neighborhood. But still the kind of the as I said, that there is still a kind of a long road to go, in the sense that what happened to women who actually have a kind of a problem with for example, the home violence, which actually has increased a lot, as well as what is the way out for the women's rights per se. So women's rights, as the development situation of Chinese women, the Chinese government have come out all the time, 2005 to 2010, 2010 to 2020, basically taking indicators of education, health, employment, etc., which also actually shows a kind of a discrimination. But what about a kind of activism, which of course you will see a kind of a online organization which also began to to make a kind of an impact in China. But somewhere, somewhere the categories of women, the way they come up in a big way, though of course on the one hand they show that how women were so actively participating in fighting against this pandemic, but on the other hand, uh, there is a kind of a existing persistent inequalities somewhere, though they have come in a big way. There's a gender stereotype, there's a particular images of women, there's a, of course, but in all the situation, there was a kind of a digital feminism in the sense of, women were writing out, women was trying to reach out to the public, women was trying to write a novel. So that became a kind of a particular interesting phenomena, which actually indicate that women decide to speak out against the kind of suffering they were having because of COVID-19. So I think I may stop here. If
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am, for such an insightful and also very visual presentation. Thank you. I think we would call our discussants and then go to our chair, Professor Kelkar, after that. So we have with us our first discussant, Dr. Priyanka Pandit. She is a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of International Relations and Governance Studies at the School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Shiv Nadar University.
Welcome, Priyanka.
Thank you, Anshula. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Ritu, ma'am, for the wonderful, for the very comprehensive presentation. In fact, what ma'am said, something like three important things actually, the presentation underscores very three important points. The first is the existence or the continuity of the gendered roles in China's public as well as in the private sector. So what the COVID-19 pandemic did was that it underscored and it in fact exposed the continuing gendered roles in China's economy. Like, for example, in the frontline workers, amongst the community workers, we see that most of the community workers, most of the frontline workers, it's the women. The caregiving community, it consists of the women. So these are the particular roles where the women get most employment. So we see a kind of a disproportionate impact on women employed in these sectors as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So which kind of, again, lead us to think about the achievements, China's achievements on gender equality after 3 decades of communism and economic liberalism. And as ma'am mentioned rightly, that despite the existence of the legal frameworks, these inequality or the gender gaps in employment or the gender biases in hiring continued in China. And therefore, women in fact found very difficult to get employed, for example, in national civil services, where the preference is mostly for men. Even to climb up the ladder in corporates, or for example in other sectors where and also the advertisements these days, it made quite like, despite the policies in place, the companies could come up with advertisements like we only want men in these positions and women are not allowed. So these things became very explicit, and what pandemic did, it kind of exacerbated this kind of inequality and increased the number of working hours on these communities, especially the community workers, the sanitation workers, the community of caregivers. And as a result, these communities felt the pressures, and due to the increasing censorship the women rights workers are facing in China after Xi Jinping came to power, and especially after President Xi's statements last year asking women to shoulder more responsibilities as far as the child care after the two-child policy in 2015. To shoulder more responsibilities of the aging, to shoulder more responsibilities of the caregiving. I think there's some kind of a tacit government support to these kind of gendered roles in public as well as in the private lives in China. And pandemic not only underscored these very striking feature in Chinese society, about the Chinese society, but it also kind of intensified the struggle the women faces in China, especially in Wuhan, of course, being the epicenter of the virus. And also, if we look at the social safety nets that exist in China, first and foremost, the entire debate about the sustainability of Chinese economy, and if we kind of link that debate to the labor force, keeping the women or the men out of that debate, if we just link it to the labor force, the labor market, the one of the key dimension, key aspects of the debate is that due to the absence of the social safety nets in China, the labor force, the migrant workers are going to be in fact, are facing the brunt of the pandemic in a major way. And in that labor force, it's the women workers who are facing the maximum impact of the pandemic, both economically, psychologically, as well as socially. And then coming to the private lives, of course, women in China mostly, yes, there has been some sort of improvement in women's lives in China over the years as compared to the other countries in South Asia, in terms of their access to higher education, in terms of their access to employment. But of course, within that, we have seen biases in terms of employment, what kind of jobs they were allowed to take up and jobs they were not allowed to enter into, or also in terms of their climbing up the ladder, and also in terms of their pay. So there was also a difference in terms of their in how they were paid. So there also existed a kind of gap on those fronts. Now, what this pandemic did to the women, in particular, belonging to the caregiving community, that while they had to work, in fact, work more hours at the hospitals, back home, they also had to, because of the gendered roles in the private lives of Chinese women, where the caregiving work, looking after the aging parents, were mostly on the women. So that extra work was something that women had also had to do in Wuhan or in other parts of China. So speaking to one of my friend who is in Wuhan, her mother is a nurse in one of the hospitals in Wuhan, and what she told me is that her mother like works at a stretch in 3 days in the hospital in China, and then when she returns, she has to then do the household chores, like the piles of clothes she is engaged into washing. So she says that I feel really bad, but then that's how it has been. So we see a kind of, so it could have been otherwise. It could have in fact brought about a cultural shift. For example, while women became mostly engaged into these outward work in the hospitals or in the public spaces, these household chores could have been easily taken up by men, which of course in China we see a kind of sharing of responsibility done by men as well, but most of it is done by women and is still done by women. So it could have been some sort of silver lining, but it hasn't happened that way. It continues to be that gendered specific roles, both in public as well as in private in China, of course in Wuhan mostly, and in other parts of China as well. Then coming to the economic aspects, the economic impact on women, like if you look at the economic redistribution of the economic impacts, and what we see is that again a disproportionate impact that the women face. So the extra work that women have engaged into, be it the frontline workers or the community workers, the extra number of hours that they have given to the hospitals or to the other jobs, they have not been adequately compensated, because again it becomes easier for the government or for the or for the managers, because it is also mostly done by the companies who hire women to carry out these kind of jobs. So again, they are not adequately compensated, lack of social safety nets, and the migrant workers who came from different provinces, as ma'am rightly mentioned, those who got tested COVID positive found very difficult to get into quarantines, and those who did not have COVID positive very much were exposed to the risks of getting COVID, and they did not even find spaces to stay. So most of them were either putting up in some corners, shanty corners in the subways, in the metro stations, or maybe spending nights in the shops, in the departmental stores. So that's how it impacted. And also the another impact when with the opening of the economy, with the opening of the markets post release of the lockdown in China, What happened as a result, that these women of course were called back to work, but then some of them even found difficult, those who actually managed to travel to the rural areas, they found difficult to come back to the cities due to the lack of the cards, the special cards which the city governments then demanded after the lockdown. So where the men found it easier to get access, to get hold of those cards, that they are free of that they are free of viruses, and they will carry adequate protective gears. Women found difficult to get access to the protective gears, as well as to get hold of those CTID cards, which became very important, which became in fact mandatory for any labor or for any migrant labor to carry while traveling to these cities. So again, they remained jobless, they were stuck in the rural areas, and their lives of course continued to remain miserable. So therefore what we can, so what this pandemic has done, mostly it has increased, or it has in fact undone the achievements that China has gained over the years in terms of gender equality, or in terms of improving the lives of women. I think there's been a sort of reversal of that achievements, and the status quo continues. Thank you.
So, will Simi or Arjun or any other questions will come on this, or?
No, ma'am, not from my end. I think we can continue. Thank you.
Ma'am, we have Dr. Arjun Kumar next. He is Director, IMPRI, and also China-India Visiting Scholars Fellow at Ashoka University, where he studies economy, housing, market, urbanization, development, and international relations.
Okay. So, Dr. Arjun Kumar.
Thank you so much, ma'am, and for really taking time from last 2 months and preparing for it, doing so much of research. So let me congratulate Professor Ritu. It was like an audit course for me, since I'm also doing this fellowship with Ashoka on China and India. And I am there looking on housing, urbanization, and economic rights in the property and housing market. And I really thought, since we also have Govind ma'am, to learn more that since Priyanka ma'am also highlighted that in the last 3 decades of communism but also economic liberalization, but there was also one child policy which came. So how has that turned up, and what has happened due to that, if you can also see that even now in modern economy, and what is their economic right or participation in employment? Yes, there is inferior set of, as Ritu ma'am is also highlighting and our panelists, but as if we compare it to India, then we see there is stark differences in our cities, in our economic markets, be it anywhere. We do not see that many women as whenever we see Chinese women in their market participation, or be it even traveling abroad or doing work abroad. So what has been the differences in terms of India and China in achieving the gender parity, especially pertaining to employment and economic right? So that I thought that one question I would ask. And secondly, I thought that is there also some aspiration, as in India there is typically choice for men and women. Most of men do polytechnic and then engineering. What has been the aspiration of the new Chinese or Wuhan or women there in terms of education and employment? We really see that many in the hospitality and hospital, many places there is a lot of participation of women, also in retail and other sectors. So I really wanted to know and understand from you the differences between India and Chinese women, if ma'am you both can enlighten. Yes, Govind ma'am.
Oh, you would like me to? Okay, then you can take all the questions, Ritu, together. No, actually, what I see the China, I studied China from its inception phase, from the Yan'an period, when the wholehearted attempts were made to liberate women, and how many 2 major laws were passed And as looking at the entire problem, looking at addressing the community and addressing the state. One was really self-arranged marriages. So parental control, parentalhood was very high, because that was the crux of the patriarchy. And so that was the self-arranged marriages were there, giving freedom to young people to choose their partners and other things. And second was the land rights. So giving individual land rights to women and men within the family, it was not really the household. Somehow, these things, as China got into the process of modernization, patriarchy kind of took hold, became stronger and stronger. It was already very strong. I mean, China and India are really known for very kind of classic patriarchal forms. Son preference. I mean, all this emerging economy and now even number 2 economy. What about happens to women? I mean, it is a kind of that we all know what happens to those missing women, which economists have pointed, like Amartya Sen, by taking examples from India and China. So how in this kind of situation, in this when a girl child is not allowed to live, even how we can think of that when she grows up, somehow she manages to live, she would be treated like a equal human being. She would not be treated. That is the kind of. So I think there is a willful discrimination in China, willful on the part of the state, on the part of the society. That is my one contention, I think, because indicators will be really missing women phenomena continues. That has been the. So there is the explicit and implicit forms of discrimination against women. Value of women's work is the kind of see that they are concentrated in lower ranking jobs. They are not there in decision making. And that is a good lesson for a lot of us, for planning people and those who think that an economist. Work participation is very high in China, but and very low in India. Okay, but work participation does not liberate women. That is the kind of because of course Mao used to say that kind of thing, washing machines don't liberate women, and somehow that. So the task was really, at one point there was a campaign just soon after or during the process of the Cultural Revolution, that men share the work and housework, and also that there should be a better local marriages. That is there was a campaign introduced, but it was soon after not promoted at all because there was so much resistance. So that is one thing that this is the background that we are dealing with. So now, and this is also which really talks about the socialist nature of the state, that how the patriarchy has continued in the socialist and communist forms of the state, because gender has to be fought on its own category. It does not really become part of any kind of either a subset of poverty or subset of socialism. That is the one factor. Second, my learning is really that some gains were made in the pre-reform period. I mean, but you know, what were these gains? For example, I have looked at the land rights question. In 1 year of when the land rights reform were passed, and when peasant women, when poor women claimed their land rights within the family, women were murdered within the family. There were some figures say 80,000 women were murdered in Yan'an itself, kind of in that period, which was the revolutionary period. So you look at the kind of patriarchal hold on the minds of the people. So, but with the gradual disappearance of the modernization process, patriarchy, also whatever the gains were made, there were laws were passed. Their women came out, they got the names. They were earlier, they did not have the names. China emerged from that kind of thing. So those things were changed, but it seems that in the modernization process of either the socialist form of modernization or the capitalist form of modernization, it's a mixture of both. Women seem to have gradually disappeared. They have lost their codified kind of rights. Women's concentration, I have said, violence against women. I was in one conference in violence against women in China. And one form of the violence was where there is no parda system in China. It is not like Bihar or Uttar Pradesh or North India. where they would observe ghungat, or they would have the sari and all this. Their dresses are like men. So that's what I'm saying, jeans and all that. But women were seen that one form of violence was said that their eyes were taken out by the men. That she was standing at the door and the man said that there were these only 2 cases, but they indicate kind of thing in one conference was presented that you are trying to find another husband. What is your kind of this thing? So violence has become very evident in the COVID period, as in many other countries. China is not the only one. India is worse kind of thing. There is France, there is Singapore. I mean, I don't know, this kind of male system and male nature, or that is what I'm talking about. That has become very evident in the COVID period, that how they have demanded the things, and how when they think that their rights are really not met, and they are no longer as the masters of the household, they resort to violence. That is what one thing would be there. Having said all this, I'm not so kind of pessimistic. These are the young women and not so young women who have been fighting all through the kind of, they have fought in the Kang Kaching fought in the revolutionary period for women's rights. There were other women, and now a lot of young women, they are fighting, they are putting protest in place, and there are some men also, young men, who are joining them. That is the kind of rights that also one sees. So attempt at women's advancement agency without state support, while the state tries everything. That feminism, they think it is a completely Western thing, it doesn't exist in China's thing. So my analysis is this, that we should not lose hope. We should really think that it is the youth, and particular youth, sensitive youth, gender responsive youth, where we have the kind of our hope, both in India and more so in China. If you look at women's writings, plays, I mean, this Wuhan Diary, what it says that she writes on the 8th March, and look at that, she says, most women are relegated to a lower social status than men, which means that when trouble comes, the Nujang, that is the women, are the ones who step in to put things back in order. So they are, although they are lower status, but they are the ones who are, this is the contradiction. They are the ones who are putting things in order. That is the kind of thing, that is the real picture of the women have to be seen. In India also, who are the frontline workers, who are the role of the ashas and the nurses, that one has to see, and similar condemn. Second, I would think that China did not really have, or India, of course, was, in the two kind of, neither it gave the control of the resources. Land law was passed repeatedly. It was 2-3 times it was amended, but still the local village committees were not allowing land to be passed, land and housing to be passed in the name of the women. I mean, they will find all kind of ways not to give it them. So that is long. So asset ownership was not in the hands of women, neither the decision making. Politburo and other kind of, wherever the decisions are made, that is in the centralized democratic system, that women are totally absent. And then you find that who will represent them? Power holders. Men are power holders here, this kind of thing. And they do not see the way the women would see their own reality. So these are some of the complexes that I think we learned from Professor Agrawal's presentation. Thank you. So back to Professor Agrawal for
yes.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah. I actually, I think Dr. Kelkar, the way she has put it, that there's still optimism, there's still some hope lies. And I really believe in that, considering the way women actually have participated. I mean, I was carried away and I was so much excited to see women's different roles, whether I talk about not only simply nurses or the medical staff, but also, the volunteer workers, the community taking care of them, the neighborhood workers. I mean, the way they have taken charge of fighting against the COVID-19 pandemic, not even, bothering about their health or their conditions or their families behind. They were just wanted to help other people who are into trouble. So that actually shows that how much they are able to negotiate. I mean, in this entire story, of course, they are the one who are actually seems to be worse affected by the pandemic. Sometimes they may get the infection, sometimes they may get into a different kind of problems. But the very fact is that, the way they are able to negotiate somewhere the strategies and able to raise their voices. For example, the ma'am is talking about the Fan, the diary, the Wuhan diary, as well as the kind of, even sometimes the nurses who decide to speak out against this hospital authorities, who decide to be silent about this pandemic. So all indicate that somewhere in China, women are able to speak out things. And I remember, many years back when ma'am and me actually went to some village survey, and I remember ma'am was saying that one can actually hear women are coming out to speak to even the foreigners, something which you don't see in Indian villages, where women are not actually seems to be made to come out of the houses and they are allowed to speak to the strangers. So this is something, the patriarchy, if you understand in terms of the way they are able to negotiate the spaces, which was earlier dominated by men. In that sense, I think the women in China, whatever you talk about, I mean, it begins from your arrival in the airport. And you see the first time the immigration officers are mostly employed, women are employed in that category as well. And then you will, of course, see women taxi drivers, women bus drivers, women even, the truck drivers as well. So the kind of physical labor, the way they have challenged with something where in India, I mean, there seems to be still a kind of a lot of gap between men and women, even dominating that space. I mean, I'm so surprised to see that some of the sectors in India seems to be still dominated by men, which is taken largely by women in a much better way in China. So the point is that the visibility of women, the way it has come up in a big way in China, as Arjun was saying, that how you see women everywhere, but it doesn't ensure that, of course, the gender equality has been attained by China in a big way, and that I'm sure one can look at the role of Women's Federation in that as well. I'm like just trying to bring the role of Women's Federation, that sometime in one of my recent visit to a kind of a township in Yunnan, I was surprised to see that Women's Federation office was shut down. So it seems to be that why? I mean, earlier the role was given to the Women's Federation was basically taking care of punishing those women who are violating the rules of two-child population policy or one-child population policy, or they were supposed to perform the role of mobilizing women to participate in the revolutionary or the post-revolutionary activities. So all that seems to be now completely over. So basically, they are involved in other kind of work. For example, they're supposed to give a scientific and technological training to women, which can be used for farming production activities, or they seems to be active in other kind of, getting this indexes done, whether what is the attainment of education, employment, etc. in terms of women. So in this sense, the role of Women's Federation also in a way has changed in a big way from revolutionary or post-revolutionary time till now. And therefore, somewhere you will see either geographically, the Women's Federation office has been very much marginalized in the other vis-a-vis other party offices, as well as the other government offices you have in China, or the Women's Federation officers, the people who are actually serving as a director, deputy director at the Women's Federation offices, they are never giving us such kind of a parity as the party secretaries, as well as the other important government officers in that position. So their position is always at the lower rank, because that's considered to be, because in China, the rank of party secretary as well as the rank of government officers seems to be based on the performance based. That if you seems to perform well, you will be giving promotions and further in promotion to a little higher level positions. But in case of Women's Federation offices, nothing seems to be performing well. In the sense, there seems to be any kind of performance assessment that you have performed well. Maybe in the initial year it was when there was a focus on the one-child population policy, but in the recent years, since those kind of the state priorities are not that important, so there's not much impact, or there's not much focus on the performances of Women's Federation officers. So they remain where they are, and sometimes. If you look at some of the studies which has been done by some scholars on women's federations, as well as the people who are working in that offices, they will say that it looks like that there is no way take them to the little higher level positions, so they remain where they are. And there you have this kind of a, the kind of a, a confinement to a particular room where the Women's Federation office has been located. And you have to carry forward the rules of the party as well as the government. And plus you don't have much incentive, as the salaries and the payment which is given to you is also much less than the other government office staff. And on the other hand, you are only supposed to perform a kind of a consultation kind of purpose work, in the sense that you're supposed to only give a kind of a policy input when government is making policy regarding women and child development. So Women's Federation seems to be much more devoted to women and child. So women and child actually comes together. So this Fu Ni, in the sense that woman is the one who's supposed to take care of the family and the child, that seems to be a much more kind of a wider accepted role which women are supposed to perform. And therefore, in somewhere, the local, whether you talk about the Women's Federation at the central level or at the local level, seems to be completely been either been marginalized, or I would say missed out by the larger policy making processes, because they don't seem to be making any kind of a great insight into the policy making. So this is the problem with the people. So there are a special department which is supposed to perform the women's work, but in the years to come, since women's work, the way it has been used to be defined by the party state, has changed in a significant ways. Therefore, it led to a not only geographical marginalization of this Women Federation office, but also a kind of a the role marginalization of this Women Federation, where they are not supposed to perform such an important role in the policy making process, which used to be the part of the earlier, where you have some of the important women revolutionary activists used to come out from the Women Federation. So this is something which I found, that, but on the other hand, you have till last 5 years back, you have this series of NGOs which came up in China, which seems to be working on the women's issues, and where domestic violence as well as the land right was taken up through the online activism. But this online activism, since it has limitations, only thing is that women are supposed to speak out their grievances against through this various the hotline services, etc. But what is the actual outcome at the ground level? That remains a kind of a question mark, because once you try to implement it or try to find out what is a local reality, that seems to be sometimes not spoken out much, not articulated much in this situation. So this NGOs seems to be now, with the Xi Jinping coming over in 2015, there was a lot of focus on mass mobilization work. So again, they were trying to revive the role of various mass organizations, as well as the linkages of the party secretary with the grassroots level, the workers. So that seems to be again brought about the whole issue of that, how all these local offices can actually work in kind of a relationship with the people who are at the masses. So that further created a kind of an image about that, how women can also be actively participated. But all that which was there in the earlier time, that the men and women seems to be reaching to the equality, or there was a kind of a equal participation of labor. So that seems to be, of course, no longer a kind of a state priority in these years. Rather, and since the household became a unit of production, this the kind of a clear division of labor also doesn't seem to be much more a kind of a clear goal which a state can actually talk about. So because most of things have been shared, the way it has been done, some work seems to be kind of a women's work. So there no longer has been question in that sense, because it looks like that feminism has left to the household head, as well as the household, the people who are working in that particular family seems to be managing that much better than the state has to interfere in that case. So that seems to be a kind of a situation which you see. But apart from that, somewhere you also see a kind of a negotiation skills or strategy, which seems to be women are talking much about their rights. And one example which I can say is that many women decided to be single or remain unmarried. So of course, Chinese state has their derogatory term for that, women who are left behind. But that's a different story. But the reason is that when women choose to remain single or unmarried, seems to be a kind of a negotiation strategy which they are able to come up with this in the given the state, the feminism kind of situation they are in. So somewhere the patriarchy, the larger questions, if you look at it, for example, in case of India, what I was very much impressed by this whole idea of urban villages in India. So you have this, for example, this Besarai and the Munirka, the urban villages in India, and the situation of domestic workers. The way they were so much affected by this pandemic 19, many of them have lost their jobs. Many of them who were migrated from the other places. They were supposed to go back to their hometowns, but in these urban villages, while they were, they were affected by the COVID-19, but then there I saw their, the desire to negotiate even with their employer. So they are ready to cut down their work. They're ready to cut down their salary. They want to work with a limited kind of a employer they are working. They don't want to go to so many houses. So somewhere, though they are limiting, they themselves are able to limit their choices, but they think that they will prefer their employer the way they want to. So a kind of a sense of a sense of a new voice, which I found very interesting in this COVID-19, especially among the urban villages in India. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we are well over time. We can hopefully have you again and have a longer session with the greater discussion. But for now, I think we will propose a vote of thanks. We are really grateful to you for taking out the time today and giving a talk on such an interesting and pertinent theme, which is the coronavirus pandemic and women's lives in Wuhan. Thank you, ma'am, for taking out the time. Thank you to our chair, Professor Govind Kelkar, for your insightful comments and inputs, as always. Thank you to our discussant, Dr. Priyanka Pandit. This was a very enlightening and enriching discussion, and hopefully we can have more again in the future. Thank you to Team IMPRI, the GenDev Center for Research and Innovation, and Delhi Post. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. We hope to see you again. Thank you, everyone, and have a very good evening.
Govind ma'am, in New Year, we will have some panel discussion, experience of Indian and Chinese women. Because we have so many experts, Ritu ma'am, Priyanka ma'am, and many more. So some more deliberation we will do to compare both the women development issues in both the countries.
Okay.
Yes.
That would be
Thank
really.
you. Yeah.
I think Ritu, you can help in terms of identifying some women, and I also will try.
Yes.
Thanks.
Zimin could not come, but I guess okay. What will their people say? Yeah. Nevertheless.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I also want to say, thanks a lot to everyone who listened to me and also give me this, time to think about and come out with something. I hope it was relevant to, continue discussion on that. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, especially Dr. Kelkar.
This is a great treat. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Professor Kelkar. It was really nice listening to both of you.